5, 4, 3.
Hello and welcome back to the Tennis Unfiltered podcast with me, James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the I newspaper. We're still missing George Bellshaw. I assume he's fine. He keeps posting random links on our WhatsApp group, so that's probably as much as we can ask for. We're not like his parents who don't ask for a phone call home, but he's still enjoying Thailand. But the wonderful upside of that, it means that we can bring back Pippa Horn to join us this week alongside Calvin Betton. Pippa, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm currently sitting in my living room, absolutely chucking it down in the window behind me. But other than that, I'm all good.
Yeah, it's been a rude awakening. I got back from Malaga about 3 hours ago, and it's a real adjustment coming from the place that's sunny all year round to whatever this is in Britain at the moment. Calvin, we haven't had any pickup on your CD covers from last week yet. I don't know if people either just can't recognise them or your music taste is too hipster. What are the ones that you can sort of recognise without looking?
People just don't care. That's the third option.
I don't like that option.
What I've got behind me, those ones there are all Nick Drake CDs.
Right.
That's Arctic Monkeys, they're Guns N' Roses.
Oof.
That's a German band, because I know it's got that pink thing. Don't know what that green one is.
Is there a cataloguing system? Like, is it organised?
It's my own cataloguing system. I know where they all are, but it doesn't have any. It doesn't have any routine to it.
That would legitimately drive me absolutely nuts.
There are some that I don't know where they are. I know there's a John Lennon album that I know I bought once, and I fuck knows where it is.
There goes the clean rated very early on. Usually we have to wait until about 45 minutes for George to swear and make me put the explicit tag on, but got it on early. There's loads to talk about this week. I mentioned Malaga. We'll, of course, talk about the Davis Cup, from which I've just got back. We'll also talk about the draw for 2024 and whether that's really everything it should be. We've got the Billie Jean King Cup draw for 2024 as well. We've got France again. And we'll look ahead to the Next Gen finals, which are kicking off tomorrow. I've been inundated with PR emails about all the nice young chaps wandering around various Saudi Arabian cities and enjoying themselves. Awful lot. And there's a little bit of any other business as well about Sky, about Wimbledon's planning permission. Believe me, it's more exciting than it sounds. And Caroline Garcia has been in Antarctica. But we will start with the Davis Cup final, where Jannik Sinner led Italy to their first title since 1976. He wasn't even born the last time they were in a final, let alone actually win the thing. But he was involved in all bar one of Italy's matches in the final 8, as it was called. And fittingly enough, it was he who sealed victory over Alex de Minaur to win the title. Calvin, it got me thinking, when Matteo Berrettini's fit, it's going to take a hell of a team to beat this Italy lot.
Yeah. Especially because Arnaldi's been a real bonus for them. Because like the start of the year, you wouldn't have thought that he'd be winning matches in Davis Cup finals. But he's really come strong in the last 3 or 4 months. He's come strong. But then you could argue that they've got so many players that they didn't need him to be so strong. Any of their top 4 or 5 players would be very good number 2s.
Although probably not Mazzetti at the moment, the way he's playing.
Yeah, he's being crap, honey, but the rest of them, like, you know, it's all right saying when Berrettini's fit again. We don't know whether Berrettini's going to get back to the level that he was. So, but I would expect that he'll continue to be a top 50 player. So yeah, they're going to be pretty strong. I think, as we'll talk about in a bit, I think they might get found out a bit in doubles, but it's whether any of their ties will even get to doubles is a different matter, I think.
Pippa, Italy, deserving winners, do you think, in the round? I mean, they started off back in September losing 3-0 to Canada, and it all looked like it was going to go tits up, but then they've clearly come strong at the right time.
So, interestingly enough, I actually tipped Italy to win this event. Obviously, I was very much hoping that Great Britain would, but Italy were my front runner, and that's because I kind of felt like they had the most depth in their team. Obviously, Serbia was kind of a one-man band, even though Kekmanovic against Great Britain was astonishing. But if I recall, and if I've done my calculations correctly, I don't think any other team had as much depth in terms of playing level and in terms of ranking than Italy had. You've got Jannik Sinner at obviously top 5 in the world, and then Musetti, Arnaldi and Sonego, they're all top 50 players. And I think it's kind of been like a progressive sort of journey for Italy, because they're getting better year on year. Last year made the semi-finals, this year then going on to win it. And I think Sinner was absolutely ruthless all week, and it was for different reasons each day. I mean, I think they did such a good job of coming out that first day and winning that doubles. Obviously, Sinner had a lot to do with that as well. But then in the semi-finals, saving those 3 match points against Djokovic is just something that doesn't happen. It's literally unheard of. Like, it doesn't happen on the tour. And then the way in which he defeated de Minaur in the final, it was an absolute showing, wasn't it? Losing only 3 games. I mean, I just think he really showed his class in that match. And, to do it on the biggest stage in the world, I think is phenomenal. And actually, Calvin, you mentioned Arnaldi there. And I think what most impressed me about him was the fact that he lost that really tight match on the first day, then got dropped, and then came back and won against Alexei Popyrin despite not playing his best tennis. Let's be honest, it was quite a nervy match, wasn't it? And it undoubtedly the biggest match of his career. I think he even said that in his press conference. So having got dropped on the second day, so not playing a match, and then coming back to win that match, I think was just absolutely incredible. And press conferences and interviews at the end said it all, didn't they?
Also, like, inexplicably dropped for Lorenzo Musetti. Like, there was no way in which, I think we talked about it the day before, and we were like, I wonder who Italy will pick. And at no point was the name Musetti mentioned. We were like, well, is it Arnaldi, or do you punt on Sonego because he's kind of got a game that might be able to upset the apple cart a bit. Like, no one expected Musetti to come out against Kekmanovic, who, I have to say, and we can talk about Great Britain because they were there very briefly, believe it or not. Kekmanovic was ridiculous against Jack Draper. I know Draper didn't probably play as well as he thinks he can, and everyone thinks he can. But given that Kekmanovic, I think, hadn't won a match in about a month, maybe longer, to come out and play like that level of controlled aggression was, I don't know, Calvin. Like, I thought Jack was actually quite astute afterwards. We said, oh, were you surprised to be playing him? Because he's like the fourth, he's the Serbian number 4 at the moment. And Jack went, no, like, I've hit with him. Like, he's a top 10 player on his day. I don't know if top 10's a bit much, Calvin, but certainly the level he has at the top of his game is maybe higher than the others two.
Yeah, I mean, he served exceptionally well, didn't he? That was the thing off the ground, there were some great rallies in it. They were both slugging it out, and it was a really good match, I think. Standard was great. The problem is Jack couldn't get near his serve, because I think we were discussing, James, weren't we, that Britain didn't have a break point in the whole day.
They didn't get to juice.
Yeah, they didn't get
past 30 in a Serbian service game.
And, like, it's not like Kekmanovic is one of the great servers. He's obviously a decent server. He's in the top 50 in the world, men's, but he's not like he's a great server. And you'd also expect that Norrie, even though he's going up against Djokovic, you'd think he'd get a sniff on Djokovic's serve at some stage, but they didn't get anything. It was weird how, like, the Draper and Kekmanovic match was like, it was an exciting match without actually ever being, it was close, but it was all really on one side, wasn't it?
It was close in the rallies, but it wasn't close on the scoreboard.
Yeah, and Drapes was in all sorts of trouble as well on his serve. Loads of the times he was going like 15-40 down and break points down, and then he'd get out of it, and you'd think that's a real turning point, and then he'd be serving again about 15 seconds later.
Yeah, it's the exact problem that Sinner had against Djokovic, which he managed to overcome, but the same thing. We'll come on to that, but before we move off Great Britain, I mean, Pippa, it's a very one-sided defeat in the quarterfinals. All right, Serbia are a decent outfit, and Novak Djokovic is the greatest of all time. But to lose without even laying a glove on them at that point, even having got through the group stages, you'd probably have to say that's a little bit of an underperformance for the Great Britain team this year in the whole.
Yeah, I think they probably came in with really high expectations, didn't they? And, last time we won it was back in 2015, I believe. Bit of a blow, obviously, with the withdrawal of Andy Murray. Because even sitting on the bench, I think, he adds another dimension to the team. And then Dan Evans as well. I don't know whether it necessarily would have changed the lineup in the scheme of things. It's sort of neither here nor there, because Leon Smith in his press conference actually said that, well, it makes things easier for him because actually, he's got a smaller pool of players to choose from. But yeah, I think hearing what the guys said before and after the tie, they definitely came in with very, very high expectations. And I think they were justified because they had a really, really good team. Jack Draper is not going to lose to many people at number 2. And yeah, unfortunate that he wasn't able to get the win against Kekmanovic, who was just unbelievable. I mean, I was sat watching that match and I kind of thought, I hadn't seen much of Kekmanovic play, but I kind of thought, it was a purple patch almost, like it was going to stop at some stage in the match. It just never did. But no, ultimately with the way that we showed up on the day, I don't think we did deserve to win that tie in the end, but a very bright future, I would say, for the Great Britain Davis Cup team.
And Calvin, to bring you on to what I know has been in your bonnet for several days, on the showing of the Serbian doubles pair in the semi-finals, you would think that if Jack had got past Kecmanovic, you would have backed Skupski and Salisbury to win that, because bloody hell, singles players are bad at doubles.
Yeah, Neil and Joe would have won that. They'd have won the doubles, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll just go back to Jack first. I mean, the thing what I really enjoyed about that match as well was just how mentally resilient both Kekmanovic and Draper were the whole time. In that there were times where if you put, for example, I don't want to pick on him, but if you put Musetti in either of those positions, he would have definitely have tanked about 16 different times in that match through the players, through losing a return game when he'd had 5 break points or something like that, or he'd have definitely, if he'd have definitely have lost the first set, the second set would have been 6-love, 100%. But it was so every single point was just they were both just going at it the whole time. But yeah, going on to the doubles, I think Joe and Neil would have won, and the doubles over the whole week, apart from Australia, who are very good because they've got Matt Purcell, who I think is maybe the best doubles player in the world. Even though, sorry,
Max Purcell.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I thought you called him Matt.
No.
Okay, sorry.
But when he chooses to play, he's as good as there is. But other than that, I thought the doubles for the whole weekend was pretty average, or below average, to be honest.
I mean, it's the Italy-Serbia match, which was Sinner and Sonego against Djokovic and Kecmanovic, none of whom really... Sonego plays a bit of doubles, and Sinner plays, that kind of thing where he plays every other Masters event, plays one match and then pulls out. And we've talked about that before. But anyway, it was a very exciting match. And I've no doubt, and I know because I spoke to people, it was fun to watch. But Calvin, it wasn't good. Can you try in layman's terms and explain why it wasn't good?
Well, the main thing with the singles players is is the territory they cover. They just don't cover anything. The server's partner just stands way too wide and I think it's a mentality thing that they come at it from a singles mentality of, right, how can I not lose this point? How am I going to not lose this point? And so they think I'm not going to get passed down the line. So they stand so wide that they're not actually taking advantage of a decent serve, because the number of returns that were coming through the middle that were just getting left, and then we're into a rally where then you're at 50-50. Whereas just some basic strategy of just standing in the right place and moving to the right place off the serve would have won any of those players about 30% more points. But they weren't doing. And then second to that, the main problem with singles players playing doubles is their defensive volleys, because they don't exist, because they don't practice them. It's a skill that you need to have, and it's different from just having reflex volleys. It's a different technique and a different feel on the shot and that kind of thing. So whenever any of the baseline players drill it hard at the net player, the point's basically over. Whereas you will find doubles players have much better defensive volleys. They can basically soak up the pace and drop it back in at a good length and just say, this is where we're at, we'll play the points from here. But it happens all the time. The two lads who I coach, whenever they play singles players, one of the initial tactics is to go straight at the singles guy at the net, because on any second serves, just drill it hard at them, because they don't have it in their locker. I'm sure they could have if they practiced it, but there's no reason to practice it because they don't play doubles. But they don't have it in their locker to actually have defensive volleys, so you can just win points really easy. Now, there's obviously certain things that singles guys can do that many doubles players can't do. Although I was a bit miffed that I saw something either this morning or yesterday, somebody saying that doubles players couldn't cope with the power that the singles players hit at, which is just a load of nonsense, really. I don't really understand where that comes from. But they do obviously have more shots in their locker from a singles perspective, but I don't think it's power or anything like that, and it's not athleticism. It's just a different type of game. It's a different game in terms of the geometry of the court, the strategy, and that kind of thing. And what you get is basically, as we saw in the Italy-Serbia match, you get 4 guys playing cross-court singles, and then it can be entertaining. But if you'd have put a good doubles player on the court with any of those players, that pair would have won for sure.
Pippa, can you talk a bit about for your experience as a player, that going from singles to doubles thing? I mean, obviously most people are primarily, if they're playing both, focused on singles. Does doubles become a bit of an afterthought, and it's like, well, all right, let's do it, and if we win a couple of matches, great? Or are you trying to think about it more than that?
I think it really differs from men's and women's tennis. And I think definitely more women's tennis players are playing doubles. And so it's also then kind of this knock-on effect, because they're playing more, because they're only playing 3-set matches, presumably best of 3 sets. So, they might have a bit more in the locker to then feel that they could, enter the doubles tournament as well. They're then winning matches because they're practicing more, which then incentivizes them to keep playing. And so I think the difference between singles and doubles on the women's side is actually far more similar than it is on the men's side. Like it's just a completely different game, singles and doubles, on the men's circuit. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You would think that because of the format of the Davis Cup and knowing that the tie is probably going to be decided by a doubles rubber, that captains would, maybe get their team playing together 3, 4, 5 tournaments in advance, playing with Kikmanovic and Djokovic. I think they entered one tournament together, maybe Paris, played a match, if I recall. But it's, as Calvin said, it's so reliant on practice. It's playing cohesively as a team, mastering your spots, and then set patterns of play, and that just takes repetition. And if you're not doing it, of course it's going to feel like a complete alien game.
Yeah. Go on, Calvin.
I think what baffles me the most, though, is with the singles guys, is that nobody has actually told them just stand further into the middle, because you're covering way too wide. Like with a crossover step, they're covering about a meter outside of the tram lines, most of these guys, and that's the one thing I get, that like the defensive volleys and stuff like that takes time and you've got to practice it. And I get why they're not practicing that, because they're making fortunes playing singles. I don't get why anybody hasn't, like one of the captains hasn't looked and gone, actually, all of these guys who are in the top 50 in the world in doubles, they're all stood with their outside foot in the center of the service box. Maybe that's a good place to stand, instead of just standing with one foot on the tram line so you don't get past in the tram line. That's what I don't get, why no one has told them that.
Calvin, you might know the answer to this actually, but I'm wondering whether any of the other teams, similarly to how Great Britain, we've got a specialised doubles coach in Louis Kerr. Do any of the other nations have a similar situation?
Not that I'm aware of, no. I mean, I don't think they have, like, the country doesn't have one. I know that the Netherlands have a couple of guys who just specialise in coaching doubles players, but I don't think they're necessarily employed by the governing body, like what Louis is. France have a lot of good doubles players, but what's interesting when you speak to the French players is that they don't have any kind of system or anything. I mean, I spoke with Nico Mahou in the summer because he was playing with Lloyd Glasspool, and he was saying he was enjoying playing with Lloyd just because he enjoyed learning about a doubles system. And this guy's won 5 Grand Slams, and he says he's never really had any system of tactics or anything to play doubles. He's just a really talented guy, and he played with another really talented guy. But what you've got to give those guys, though, and those guys, Nico Mahou was a top 20 singles player, I think, and Pierre Hughes Hebert's been top 60 in the world, and those guys, they've figured out, look, they stand in the right place. They tend not to ever cross. When you watch them, they tend not to ever cross or anything like that, and they just basically serve volley, and they stay in regular most of the time and that kind of thing. But they've got no actual system of playing. So Britain's quite unique in that front, as well as, I guess, maybe, I don't know this for a fact, but I guess Canada have maybe got some leftover from Louis. A lot of the coaches will have worked with him over there, and but then they've kind of doubles players have faded out, like Nesta's retired and that kind of thing, and Felix and Shapovalov don't play any kind of system. They both stand too wide. So no is the answer. There's no other. There's countries that have, like, France has a lot of good doubles players, Netherlands has a lot of good doubles players, and Germany has a lot of good doubles players. But again, I think a lot of that is I put most of that down to all those countries have really strong club leagues, and so you just play loads and loads of doubles at a high standard.
I think it's interesting looking at just glancing at who all the captains are, and there's not many doubles guys captain. Significantly, Bob Bryan is the American captain, and I know it's not a great example because they went out in the groups, but he picked his 2 top 5 doubles players in Krajicek and Ram because he wanted a specialist doubles pair. And as you say, Calvin, lots of good Dutch doubles players. They picked 2 specialist double guys in their team. There is kind of a little bit of a theme emerging there that, and I would say, okay, America maybe not, but I would say the Netherlands outperformed themselves. Finland obviously were kind of the surprise package getting to the semi-final. And they picked 1 specialist doubles guy in Harry Heliovara. I suppose Patrick Nicholas, what's his name, Calvin? Patrick Nicholas Salminen.
Yeah,
I mean he's not top 100, but he is technically a specialist doubles.
I mean, the problem with Patrick is that he had a really good start to the year, and he's got an absolute cannon, and then he had a bad injury, and he can't really serve anymore. So he kind of dropped off in that front. The Dutch is an interesting one because they've got lots of good doubles players who all play the same side. I think their top 4 players all play deuce. So basically what they had a situation with, so they have Roger and Koolhof, who are both top 10 in the world. I think Roger is still top 10.
Maybe.
But they both play deuce. And that's quite a big change. It's not a case of just going and returning on the other side. The actual movements of return as partner and that kind of thing are all different. So, and certain players will specialize in certain types of returns. So they had a situation where they either could play both. I know that they had both down to play initially, and then they moved Roger out and played Talon Griekspoor, who is actually a singles player who can play decent doubles. But again, he relies mainly on his singles ability. And he also, when he's played doubles, he's played this year with a lad called Bart Stevens. And again, Talon plays on the deuce side.
So they're just lacking. So it's like England in the 90s. They haven't got anyone who can play on the left
wing.
Yeah. Right, let's move on to what was, for me, I mean, I had lots of jaw-drop moments watching Sinner Djokovic on Saturday afternoon. It was probably the best tennis match I've watched all year, certainly top 3 with Murray Kokkinakis and the Wimbledon final. Sinner saving 3 match points deep in the 3rd set. Love 40 down on his own serve he was. Interestingly, I wrote a little piece sort of like detailing each one and going through it, and I asked Sinner about it afterwards. And he said the first one, Djokovic missed like quite an easy slice backhand, and it was long. And he said, that actually gave me a huge lift. And I thought that was really interesting because, you know, you're still against Novak Djokovic trying to save break points, but there must have been a little switch in his head that just said, this guy is human and he might miss. And if I can just play my game, then he might not be able to do it slightly better. Pippa, can you ever, I mean, you correctly said it was unprecedented. It's the first time Djokovic has ever lost a match, having been 3 match points up. It's only the 4th time in his career he's ever lost a match, having been any match points up. How the hell did he do it?
I don't know is the answer to that. I think definitely he got a lot of confidence from his win against Djokovic in the group stages in Turin at the ATP finals. And so I think, you know, he probably sort of banked that, but it's completely different, isn't it? Doing it on the biggest stage when you're 3 match points down and you need to win this match in order to keep Italy in the Davis Cup. And I mean, to put it into perspective, that was Djokovic's first defeat, I think, at the Davis Cup since he lost to Juan Martín del Potro, which was a retirement.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, absolutely unbelievable. And I think the tables will turn now for Sinner. I mean, they're already turning. I think we knew that going into the Davis Cup. But, you know, not only has he proved that he has the weapons to defeat Novak Djokovic, but he can also do it on the absolute biggest of stages in the most anxiety-provoking situations when the weight of your nation is on your shoulders, and he can repeat it. I mean, with the doubles included, he beat him 3 times in 11 days. So I think that says it all, really.
Calvin, this is probably too simplistic, but I'm a journalist and we like simple things and we like narratives. Is Sinner beating Djokovic here his Andy Murray 2012 Olympic final moment?
I don't know, because he beat him a week ago as well. And I know he lost to him in the final, but he was still like, the group matches were still pretty big. But although he might have been better off letting him beat him that time, as it happened.
Yes, quite.
But oh no, it wasn't him, was it? Was it Djokovic?
No,
who could have tanked
Rune was
against?
the one he should have
chucked.
chucked.
That's it. Yeah, sorry. I don't think. I mean, knowing Sinner a little bit, he's a bit of a unique character. I don't think he actually needs those type of things mentally to convince himself that he can do it. I think it's more just game development. He's just a better player now than he was. He's had a couple of losses. I mean, he was 2 sets to love up on Djokovic at Wimbledon last year, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then really fell to pieces. Although that was one of those matches where Djokovic,
it was
basically
Djokovic was playing dead.
Yeah. But I mean, I think what's important for him this year is that although he hasn't had a huge win, he won a Masters series, but he's shown this year that he can beat, and he thinks he can beat, and he can beat both Alcaraz and Djokovic in big tournaments on a regular basis. And that's something that no one else can do. So you'd have to say that he's probably now the 3rd best player in the world, I think, above Medvedev, because Medvedev, I don't think, can beat either of them most of the time. He can pretty much beat everyone else, but I think both of those guys beat him if they play quite well.
I think that the reason I made that comparison, other than that it was dead easy and it was in my head, is I think because like the thing that Sinner hasn't got, and you mentioned the blow up against Djokovic at Wimbledon. He had match points against Alcaraz at the US Open. Like, he's got a few of these high-profile chokes, for want of a better word, in big matches. He's only ever won 1 quarterfinal in Grand Slams. He's only ever been in the last 4 once. Like, he is just lacking a little bit that big kind of. I'm sure he is definitely a different character. He's a bit of a nerd, frankly. And that will actually, I think, hold him in very good stead, because it means that he's quite kind of detail-orientated. And I think that's why he gets on well with Darren Cahill as well, by the way. I was speaking to people this week about him, who I think is probably the best coach in the world, or at least in the top 5. And talking to people who've worked with him before, that kind of quite calm exterior, quite detail-orientated, like very into analytics and very specific details, I think probably works well with him. But anyway, coming around to the point I was trying to make, I just think having those conspicuous demons, even if it's just people asking you about them all the time, oh, when are you gonna win a Grand Slam semi-final? When are you gonna actually beat a world number one? When are you gonna win a major title? He can now go, well, I've beaten the world number one 3 times if you really want to be picky about it in 11 days. And I've won a major title because I won the Davis Cup for my country. And while I know the Davis Cup isn't what it always was, it was a big deal. Like, even just for his four mates standing on the sideline.
It is. You find that every year the Davis Cup matters to about really matters to about 2 or 3 countries. And it's never the same countries time and time again. And if actually all the countries were bothered about it at the same time, you'd have a really serious competition, I think. But you always find that just 1 or 2 of the players like really commit to it. On that, it's a bit different from Murray in the Olympics as well, James, because I think, especially this whole year for Sinner has been, because Murray in the Olympics was like, he beat Djokovic in the semis, but he'd grown up with Djokovic. They're the same age. They played right through juniors, and he'd beaten him plenty of times before. Maybe not in the biggest tournaments, but he had beaten him throughout juniors, so he knew he could beat him. I mean, I think Murray was even probably a better junior than Djokovic was, all in all. And Federer, we beat Federer in the final, but Federer had played for like 6 hours the day before against Del Potro. And I remember that final was like Federer was cooked. Like, there wasn't much for Murray to do in the set. Yeah, there wasn't much. I think it was like something like 18-16 in the
it was like 1, 3, and 4, wasn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, so I think this one for Sinner is different in that he'd basically not had any wins against Djokovic going into into World Tour finals, and even against Alcaraz, a bit different. When I said that Murray was probably a better junior than Djokovic, I think they're the same ballpark. Like, whereas Alcaraz and Sinner were completely different. I mean, Alcaraz was like he barely played any juniors because he was just tearing up seniors at that time, and Sinner just wasn't a very good.
You kind of alluded to it there, Calvin. Pippa, you were commentating, I know, a bit on Davis Cup finals this week. Did it feel like a really properly top level event?
So I was actually commentating remotely, so I'm just caveating this answer with the fact that I wasn't actually there. So I didn't get to see, the atmosphere firsthand. But, from what I watched, I think the atmosphere was great in Malaga. And I think it was much more of a success than lots of people and probably the players thought it was going to be, because, quite a few of the players were quite vocal, weren't they, about the format of the Davis Cup, when it was announced that it would change. And yeah, many of them complaining about the new format change. But yeah, I think, the Finnish fans in their semi-final, I believe, had around 3,000 Finnish supporters there. There were 5,000 Brits in our quarterfinals. So I think the advantage of having a centralized venue is that the fans can plan in advance, and they can purchase tickets and make time for the Davis Cup in their calendars. And I think this definitely happened. But yeah, of course, you've got Djokovic's fans always sort of following him around as well. So it did, from my perspective, seem like, the atmosphere was pretty good. And I think the starting point is that it does seem to be getting better year on year. This event in Malaga was better than last year's finals, and a really good turnout and a great atmosphere. However, having said that, I do also understand the reasons, why some players have been quite critical, and Tennis Australia opposed the decision because it robs fans of regular opportunities to see their home heroes in action competing on home soil. My worry was that it would deter some of the big names from playing. I don't think it necessarily has, but Calvin, that's a really good point that you made, and I hadn't actually thought of that, but it makes so much sense. It does kind of feel like it's a big deal to sort of 3 or 4 nations each year, and they differ year on year. Like the fact that Djokovic rocked up this year, I think speaks volumes about how much he wanted to win the Davis Cup. Will he rock up next year? Who knows? But it sounds like it's a work in progress. I'd be surprised if there aren't more changes in sort of the next 10 years or so, but ultimately you're never going to please everyone, are you? You know, there are so many moving parts in making a decision like this for the ITF, and you frankly just can't please everyone. You know, Czechia, one of the best tennis nations in the world, unfortunately, there are no plans for there to be a Grand Slam in Czechia, for my knowledge, and you know, that's just something they need to accept. Sucks for them, but unfortunately, you know, they're not going to see a home player win a home slam.